Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers swept the Sacramento Kings in the season series, winning 132 to 122. Doing so for the first time since the 2009-2010 season. Lakers have won 5 of 6 games, 6 of 8. They are now 18-13, and they have moved up to 5th in the Western Conference, which they had not been in that spot since earlier in the season, much earlier in the season. They also did so without LeBron James. LeBron missed tonight with an illness. I feel like I'm starting to come down with that illness. I know several media members feel the same way. It seems like something's traveling around the locker room again, and I'm all stuffy now and not feeling great. So gonna persevere through this one for you guys and give you a quick scheduling update for what the next week looks like with Lakers playing on New Year's Eve and kind of going into the new year. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. As always, for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, like this video, and make sure to drop a comment. And then for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. So before I get to my first takeaway, I just wanted to say that this is going to be my last stream of 2024. I know it is sad for me too, but with just the way that the schedule is working out, I am not going to be going live after the Cavs game Tuesday night, because by the time that game gets out, I'm gonna have to write, and it's about to be New Year's, so gonna spend that with my wife and my son and put the family first. But I will be back January 1st at some point late morning, early afternoon, going live with a later post-game reaction from Lakers Cavs, and then not going to have an episode Monday. So going to spend the next few days focusing on family time. My son's out here for winter break, so gonna put that first. But I will be back on January 1st, and then we'll have an episode of Buha's Block later in the week. Already started to get some guests lined up for early to mid-January, so I've got a good slate coming with that. But brings me to, if this is going to be my last stream of 2024, barring something crazy happening. Of course, if the Lakers make a trade or there's a big injury update or something, like I will react to that and carve out some time. But with that potentially being my last stream of 2024, I just want to thank all of you for watching and listening for the past 9 months or so, for helping grow this channel to almost 20,000 subscribers. And I'm so excited for 2025 and what's to come, and just continuing to tinker and grow the channel, and just continue to do things at a higher level, and better framing with the camera, and better thumbnails, and better titles, and all that stuff, and just continue to grow this out, and better guests. Of course, that's a big one too, and just continue to build this channel and this community and this family, frankly. And I just want to say I thank you all so much for watching, listening, the super chats, the comments, the likes, moderating, and just everything. So I really want to shout you all out and say I hope you have a great rest of 2024, great beginning of 2025. And with all the sappy stuff out of the way, let's get into tonight's game. So Lakers win again, 132 to 122. And my big takeaway is Austin Reaves, the maestro. And I want to take a big picture look at this, because going back to this past offseason and even the previous offseason, there had been a lot of buzz about Austin stepping up as the primary ball handler, being more involved in the offense. And I think he showed a real level of growth in terms of his playmaking and his passing over the second half of last season, and really started to develop and just, elevate to a different level with that. But, entering this season, there was similar buzz with JJ, and we saw ultimately there was some truth to that because Austin has remained in the starting lineup. He's had a certain level of usage and scoring and playmaking, but JJ talked about it after the game. Like the Lakers kind of went away from that, and they went away from him for running as many sets for him and ATOs and just having him be as involved as he probably should have been earlier. And as Austin kind of pointed to after the game, like there have been some times he struggled with ball pressure and turnovers and stuff. So I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. And even the Detroit game, which was just a couple games ago, he obviously had 6 turnovers and was a big part in LA coughing it up and not, playing to their best offensively. But tonight, 26 points, 16 assists, back-to-back games with double-digit assists. He has 10 on Christmas with the triple-double, 16 tonight, career high for him. And he just was incredible from a playmaking perspective. Did have 5 turnovers, it is worth noting. And this is against the Kings, so it's also worth noting, not the best defense. And let's just say team turmoil right now with the firing of Mike Brown. I think this is their 6th consecutive loss, if I'm not mistaken. So certainly some circumstances playing into the Lakers' favor, playing into Austin's favor. But in rewatching, I went back and rewatched some clips just to kind of make sure I was seeing things the way I was. And it was just a lot of like high pick and roll with Austin, and there's some guard-to-guard screening, but a lot of 2-man game with Austin and AD, some stagger screens and in 3-man actions and stack actions. And like, I just think a lot of this was Austin beating guys off the dribble, attacking guys, attacking with his unique style of pace and timing. And I think his improved handle, his improved decision-making, his improved passing, his improved vision. And this was one of the best passing performances of the season by any Laker, right? Like obviously D'Lo had the 14 assist game against the Blazers. LeBron has had several assist games in this range, but like Austin really controlled this game from a just execution perspective offensively. And I felt like he always had the answer to whatever Sacramento was throwing at him, whatever they were throwing at the Lakers just in general. And JJ talked about it. Austin talked about it. Like there is an element here of shot making, right? Like you could only have 16 assists if your teammates are making shots. So that was a big part of it. LA shot, I have it here, basically 60% and 54% on threes, 14 for 26. So still continue to be a low volume 3-point shooting team, but at least there's some progress there with the percentage. The Lakers are beginning to regress to the mean a bit the last couple of games. But I just thought Austin was great from a decision-making standpoint. And again, just the shot pass, the decision tree. I don't know why it's hard for me to say that. It just him attacking closeouts and cutting and even like there's other stuff he did off the ball that they ran that first opening action for him to get a 3. And I just think he's been in a really good groove since he's returned from injury. He's had multiple games now with 7+ assists. And I think he's looked a lot more comfortable as the primary ball handler. And I think another part of this has been Max Christie starting and him taking the primary defensive assignments and slotting Austin more as like that secondary guy defensively, which I think saves his legs a bit, though, based on tonight's matchup and other matchups, there are plenty of teams with quality backcourts that are going to test Austin even in a secondary role. But I just think he's looked like he's had more juice, more energy, and him shooting the ball the way that he's been shooting it, passing and creating. He's looking like, we've talked a lot about the number 3 role, and I think the way he's played has fulfilled the need for number 3, but even more so just like that primary ball handler, creator guy. And yes, there are going to be some matchups. I think looking at like a Minnesota, a Detroit, some of these teams with the elite athletes and the ball pressure can give him some problems. And that is something that the Lakers, I don't think it gets necessarily much better with D'Lo in there, right? So he tends to struggle with the same thing. So like this is kind of a team-wide problem that they're going to have to scheme and figure out. And maybe it is going out and getting a more athletic ball handler, initiator to kind of help offset that in those particular matchups. But for the most part, I think Austin has lived up to, if not exceeded expectations recently, probably exceeded them, honestly. I mean, 16 assists, I don't think anyone had that on their Austin bingo card. And I just think he's playing really good basketball at the right time. And he's been a big part of LA. Like I talked about it on episode 74 with Claire. Like Austin, I think has shown his importance to this group of they go 1-3 during that previous 10-game stretch without him. He comes back. They immediately go 4-2. They look much better. The offense is looking better. Really, they've looked better on both sides of the ball. And I think he's been a big part of that. So just wanted to give Austin his flowers for tonight's performance because I thought he was really the driving force behind the offense, especially again with LeBron out. Takeaway number 2 is AD finally found his shot against the Kings because he had 36 points tonight, which was more than he had in Sacramento for that 2-game road series, that baseball style series. He had 31 points combined in those 2 games. And I thought one of the games, he basically matched Sabonis. The other game, he outplayed him. Tonight, he just dominated Sabonis. Like this was, in my opinion, as one-sided as any of these matchups have been with him and Sabonis, at least in AD's favor. But tonight, 36 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists. If you look at it, like AD had not been as involved offensively from an assist perspective recently. Lakers have gone away more from having him as that hub, having him as that creator. And it felt like tonight they went back to the early season AD. He actually had 31 against the Kings in the first matchup, the third game of the season. And tonight he goes 12 for 16 from the floor, 1 for 1 on threes, 11 for 13 at the free throw line. So he was very aggressive off the dribble. Lakers did a good job of getting him downhill, putting him in positions on the move to attack the Kings defense. And of course, Sabonis is an advantageous matchup to him, which has been the weird thing about the previous struggles against Sabonis is like on paper, actually, this is a guy AD should dominate based on his defensive limitations. AD's bigger than him, at least from a height perspective. And he's not like some rim protector shot blocker. So obviously he's a beast, right? Like Sabonis is a beast. But AD fouled him out tonight. And I thought, looking at it, what did Sabonis finish with? He had 14 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists. So like he does always put up good counting stats. I will give him the credit for that. But AD dominated him tonight. So I think AD, like his jumper has, I think in general, looked better for several weeks now. It's still a bit inconsistent. There's going to be some off nights, but I think he started to look more like the AD from earlier in the season, and defensively didn't have a steal or a block, which I kind of found interesting, but wasn't necessarily representative of the defensive performance he had tonight. But I think AD was, of course, like anytime LeBron is out, the Lakers need AD to step up. And I thought he stepped up in a big way tonight. And that combination of him and Austin and the 2-man game and even some decoy actions of stagger or stacks and sort of just manipulating the floor to get those 2 guys on the left side or just get those guys attacking on the move. Like I just thought that the Lakers, certainly I will say like some stagnant moments for the offense in the fourth quarter. Like Lakers got the lead to 20 and then Sacramento cut it to 7 at a couple points. So the fourth quarter, Lakers continue to when they get a lead, they get complacent. They stop running their offense the same way. I do think the bench in general kind of struggled tonight. Like Dalton had a big game, but some of the bench lineups were a bit subpar and allowed the Kings to get back into it in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. But aside from that, like I thought AD, it's not AD related. I'm just kind of laying out the game, but I thought AD had a great game and dominated Sabonis for really, in my opinion, like the first time it was this decisive where Sabonis had Sabonis was almost like they stopped running the offense through Sabonis, and it became way more Fox, Monk, DeRozan. That they went away from Sabonis, which they rarely do. He is the hub of the offense, right there, like the co-pilot with Fox. So I thought that was very impressive from AD, just the way that he controlled both sides of the floor. And then third takeaway is, I mentioned it at the top, but LA has won 6 of 8. 5 of 6, depending on which one you want to go with. And they're now 5th in the West. And I think there's a real opening here as we look toward 2025. The year's not over yet. They still have another game. But looking at the West standings, it's like Dallas is going to slip. They're almost certainly, maybe Kyrie and Klay Thompson can keep them at a certain level. But I think Dallas is likely going to slip into at least the bottom half of the playoff mix, if not, into the play-in. And I think that there's an opening there where OKC, Memphis, and Houston have distanced themselves a bit from the rest of the West. Might be tough to catch those teams, especially with LA. They have a very home-heavy schedule the next month, but they do have some tough games. I mean, even closing out with Cleveland is as tough as it gets basically this season. But some games with just some tough teams to open up 2025. But there's a real chance here with the home heavy schedule, with them only leaving. So they play Houston and Dallas in that early road trip in 2025. Texas trip. Outside of that, they're in LA or California for basically a month, if you look at it. And they got a road game in Golden State, road game against the Clippers, but otherwise they're at home. And then they got the Texas trip. So LA has a chance here for as grim as things have looked at times, as again, I talked about it on the storylines episode, say the Lakers, like you could nitpick and find, like you could point to the point differential, the net rating, some of the lineup data, and just some of the season long stuff of LA looking more like an average team or a slightly above average team. But they're right there at 18 and 13, 5th in the West. And if they can, we'll see what happens with the Cleveland game. I think that's going to be a big challenge, especially like LeBron should be back in theory for that one. But coming off an illness, I mean, he's coming off his 40th birthday, playing Cleveland. I think LeBron will be ready. I think that's safe to assume. But still, that's going to be a tough game, regardless of how well LeBron is playing. And after that, things get a little bit easier, and then they could continue the momentum. But I think LA's quietly like positioned themselves well and ridden through this storm here of the peaks and valleys of the season. And a valley could be right around the corner, because that's just the way that these Lakers seasons have tended to go. Of they've just been very inconsistent and very hot and cold. But it does feel like this group. The defense was not great tonight. Like, let's be clear. The Kings scored 122. They outscored them in the paint, and they got out in transition a decent amount, including after Lakers makes. It wasn't just like after turnovers. So I would say that the defense took a step back, and part of it was just the lack of size with no LeBron. LA lost the rebounding battle tonight by 6, and like, there were just times they were so small out there, and you really felt that. Also should mention that Gabe Vincent left the game with an oblique strain. There's no update on him. They said they're doing some testing and kind of figuring out the extent of that. But another tough blow for the Lakers. Cam Reddish left with a back spasm. They did not. I don't know if that was an error in terms of the designation, but it was back spasm, not back spasms. And he returned. And then Jackson Hayes was technically active, but he told ESPN before the game that he was not going to play and was going to try to play Tuesday against Cleveland. So he was active, but technically not available despite suiting up. So those are some of the injury updates. Otherwise, Christian Wood, Jared Vanderbilt, no real updates there. JJ talked about them at practice yesterday and said he didn't want to speculate on when they were going to return, just that if you had to make a prediction, Jackson would be the first one to return. So it seems like Jackson could be closing out 2024 back in the lineup after missing 20 of the past 21 games. And then Christian Wood, Jared Vanderbilt, those guys are not going to be playing until at least early January on the early side, but potentially later, depending on, again, I'm done trying to predict or figure out Laker injury stuff. It's a very frustrating situation to cover. So I digress, but let's get into the Q&A. I think that just about does it. Touched on, we'll say like Max 16 points, hit a big three late to extend the lead back to double digits. I thought De'Aaron Fox's numbers looked better. He won off in the fourth, but like through the first three quarters, I think he was like 6 of 19, something like that. Then went like 6 of 7 or 5 of 6 or something in the fourth. Max, I thought, did a really solid job on him again and locked him up through the first three quarters. Then De'Aaron finally went off, though Max was partly on Monk during part of that. Dalton Connect broke out his biggest game in over a month with 18 off the bench. And Rui, I thought, was excellent tonight. Did get beat off the dribble a bit by DeMar DeRozan, but had 21 and continues, in my opinion, to be active as a low man and becomes something of like a defensive playmaker at times with like the steals and the blocks. And like, I think the help defense has been really good from Rui lately. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. I see we got some super chats. First one from Delo's Strongest Soldier. Thank you for the super chat. No Darvin Ham versus Redick tweets tonight. LOL. Yeah, people like to cherry pick that one when they want to use it, but certainly JJ has solved the Kings in a way that the previous regime went 1-7 against them. Next one from Gabriel. Austin Reaves has once again saved my life. The AR can't be primary guard narrative can be put to rest now. I largely agree with you. I will say again, like he did just struggle a bit against the Pistons, and I think there are going to be certain defenders or matchups that are tough for him. But I would say if we're looking at it like out of 10 times, like 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 times, he's going to be fine to excellent. And those other 2 to 3 times, he might struggle a little bit depending on the matchup, depending on the defense. Like there obviously are some really athletic teams that it's not just an Austin thing. It's a D'Lo. It can even be a LeBron depending on the matchup. But really just like the Lakers perimeter guys, when there's ball pressure and they have to attack that, it can be difficult for them. And even so, Austin has often been the best one against that type of stuff. JJ continually talks about his value in terms of touching the paint, getting downhill, drawing two, and then spraying the ball out. And that's an element of the offense that they don't have consistently. So I'm largely with you, though. I pretty much agree with that. Super chat from Braden. Happy New Year, Jovan. Thank you for the streams. We appreciate you. Thank you, Braden. Happy New Year to you as well. And I appreciate you for the super chat. I appreciate you for watching and listening. And I appreciate you for the thank you. So I appreciate you as well. Super chat from Laker Sean. Pelinka trade expectations high, so he has an out. Hasn't made that trade since he started in 2017. Won't magically arrive in final LBJ window. I'm curious what you mean by hasn't made that trade, because I would point you to the Westbrook trade, which was a big trade. It was a disastrous trade, but it was a big trade. It was a big swing. I would say an ill-advised swing, and that's not hindsight. That was in the moment. It was an ill-advised swing. But then I do think Rob deserves a lot of credit for the 2023 trade deadline. I think there was a lot of factors that went into that in terms of LA having some bad contracts that they had the optionality to trade, whereas right now, and like some expiring money and some big, like the Russ contract was a big contract. So they don't really have that right now. Like anyone, even D'Lo, who's been so up and down and like had a better fourth quarter tonight, but I thought really struggled the first 3 quarters. Trading him, you are potentially creating a hole that trading a Kendrick Nunn or a Thomas Bryant or Patrick Beverly at the 2023 trade deadline, like you weren't creating, even a Russ. I mean, it should have led with that one. Like you weren't creating the same hole. Like right now, if they trade Rui, if they trade D'Lo, even if they trade Gabe with the way he's been playing recently, Vando's the lone exception because he's been injured. But Vando also has 3 more years on his contract, and I would say it's probably the toughest of those contracts to trade. So we'll see. But I'm not quite sure what you mean. Like, if you're maybe saying like he hasn't made the trades that are often linked to the Lakers, and some of the like Lakers are chasing this guy and then it doesn't happen. Like, I agree to a point, but in general, he has made some big trades. It's just he almost hasn't made a trade in it's been 22 months, and that's just too long. Super chat from Todi, BGN. Bruce for 3 seconds, Kessler for 1 first-round pick and remove the protection. Johnson 1 first-round pick and swap. I'm boring. It's obvious and game-changing. Over to you, Rob. I would say that would have to quickly kind of go through the contracts just to make sure everything lines up. You probably almost certainly have to give up Rui in this trade, or at least one of the trades. That would be just one consideration there. But I've had some variation of Bruce Brown, Kessler, Johnson thrown at me in some of these like mock trades, and I'm always on board, especially for all these prices seem relatively in line with what I would expect these guys to go for. I mean, if anything, even with Johnson, I'd probably fight to make that like a 2nd-round pick instead of a swap. Even 2 2nd-round picks. At that point, you are dumping all your 2nd-round picks, but maybe you could get a worse 2nd-round pick in the Toronto deal for Bruce Brown, or even the Brooklyn deal for Johnson. We've seen some teams send back 2nd-round picks in these kind of deals for multiple picks. So, but yeah, I mean, if you, depending on the outgoing salary, can come away from the trade deadline with Bruce Brown, Walker Kessler, and Cam Johnson, if I'm the Lakers, I would sign up for that. Denny Corona, thank you for the super chat. Good win without Braun, plus 1 week of rest for him. Yeah, I don't think this was intentional. So please do not aggregate or quote me on that. But just looking at the schedule, it's like it kind of makes sense as an advantageous situation now for LeBron. Plays on Christmas, has the 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th off. That's 5 days, then plays again on the 31st. So I think we're going to see. Now, I will say again, I'm feeling the symptoms. I know Rui was feeling the symptoms. Something is going around the team. So I don't want to dismiss that LeBron is going through something, but having that 5 days of rest, I think will do wonders for his performance on Tuesday. Shabugan, who's this Vanderbilt guy? Did you make him up? Look, I've seen him on the bench. He wears he wears some nice fits, but yeah, I mean, Lakers need him back. Like if you just look at some of, I think Max, Cam, and Gabe have done a really good job defensively, especially the last couple weeks. But if you just think about, like, there are certain matchups where Vando would just be better than one of those 3, depending on the night, depending on the opponent. And if you put Jared Vanderbilt in for one of those 3, I think Max is safe now as a starter or whatever. So it's more of a, I would say, Reddish or Vincent conversation. But there are matchups you need more defensive wing play. You go Reddish and Vanderbilt. You need a point of attack guy and defensive wing. You could go Vanderbilt and Gabe. So like, I just think they missed that defensive versatility, just the size, the rebounding, the length. Like, no need to rehash the Vando conversation, but I think that the more this team kind of finds its identity on both sides of the ball, you see how he would fit in. It's just a matter of, when is that going to happen? How long is it going to take him to return? How long is it going to take him to ramp up and look more like himself once he returns? Do the Lakers end up moving him at some point? Can they even move him based on the contract? So there's a lot of questions with him. Super chat from Victoria McGuire. In-game adjustment, AD saving AR from turnover and a double Monk hot hand. Rui playing hard after Sabonis touching up our guys. Go Lakers. Yeah, I didn't mention that Gabe got injured on a really tough Sabonis screen. I'll just say. But yeah, AD, the catch radius and just the hands in the paint. really strong. And I think Rui's been like the unsung hero to me. Like I know his numbers have been pretty up and down game to game, but I thought the Warriors game, he was really, really good. Tonight, he was really good. Like the Rosens, this is a tough matchup for Rui from a defensive perspective in terms of like on-ball defense, because like Fox and Monk are too quick for him, and the Rosen's very crafty and shifty, and like he's just a pure bucket getter who can, with the footwork and the shot fakes, and he's kind of got his own pace in his herky-jerky style. Like the Rosen can create separation, and I thought the Kings featured him a lot more tonight in a way that I was kind of surprised they didn't, or at least didn't in the second Sacramento game once they didn't as much in the first one. But I thought he did a really good job. And then, Monk got hot late, and it's always fun seeing Monk interact with Austin and AD, because those guys go back, obviously, from a few years ago. Super chat from Shibugan, sorry. Name still throws me off a little bit, I will admit. Do you think they're actively phasing out D'Lo? I wouldn't say actively phasing out D'Lo, but I have talked about this before, that I think there's been an internal realization that he's among the guys most likely to be traded if they make a trade. It's just he's an expiring contract making almost $19 million. That's one of their more valuable assets in terms of like a realistic contract that they're willing to trade. Of course, LeBron, AD, Austin, but they're not trying to trade those guys. So among the mid-sized contracts, like D'Lo's expiring, Rui still has another year, Gabe still has another year, Vando still has 3 more years. So if a team is trying to get off money they don't want, or just get some more cap flexibility in terms of how they want to build out their roster, trading for an expiring in D'Lo at that mid-sized salary of about $18.7 million makes sense. So with D'Lo, I think I talked about this before the season, that like I felt like they needed to restructure the offense and the lineup. And like if there was an argument to moving him to the bench, it was just that if they're eventually going to trade him 50 games into the season, it doesn't make sense to make him your number 3 or number 4 option in the starting lineup and then have to scrap that identity and scrap that continuity and scrap that lineup 50 or so games in, and then bring in, either you're promoting someone from the bench or you're bringing in a new player, and you're just changing your identity. And now you have to kind of figure things out with 30 games left before the playoffs. So I felt it made more sense to kind of shift him to a 6-man role and to become less dependent on him, because eventually they were going to be entirely not dependent on him when they trade him. Now, of course, if they don't trade him, then I think that opens up the conversation of like, what's the best way to use him moving forward, and maybe they reevaluate that. But I wouldn't say it's been an active phase out, but I think there's been an element of phasing him out. I think ideally they would like him to be more of that like Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford, Jordan Clarkson, like offensive burst guy off the bench. And certainly I would say there's been some phasing out of him as like a playmaker, and he hasn't had the same opportunities to run the offense and like create for others, especially more recently with Austin back and Austin having the ball more. But I don't think there's been an active like, we like don't want D'Lo to be involved. I think it's been more of a shifting of the hierarchy and the priorities, and D'Lo has been de-emphasized. But it's kind of semantics, but I would say I don't think it's specific to D'Lo so much as it is more about getting like AD. You're trying to reestablish AD and trying to give Austin a certain role, and then there's a lot of offensive talent on this team. Now, I will say D'Lo is obviously a certain level of shooter and playmaker that they need. So they've been in a weird spot with him, but I do think they've shown they're not as reliant on him, especially recently. And it's more of a luxury of like, if he has a good game, he has a good game and they look even better and he raises their ceiling. If he doesn't, they've now sort of restructured things where they can get by without him, without depending on him the way that they did, say, like last season. Super chat from JR Madrano. Have you ever thought about a trade breaking while you're on live? How would you operate if that were to happen? I want to say at some point last season, the Lakers might have signed someone or no, it was Harry Giles. It was Harry Giles when they signed him to, I think it was a 10-day contract. So that happened. And I was behind in the chat. So then I was trying to catch up and react and respond to that in the moment. So not the sexiest move, signing Harry Giles to a 10-day, but it was something to talk about. So, I mean, at that point, depending on when it is or whatnot, like I'd probably have to get off and make phone calls and start talking to people and also start writing because my primary role remains being a reporter for The Athletic. But then I would quickly, once that's done and sorted, I would hop back on and like maybe I'd go talk for 5-10 minutes, give you my quick take on whatever happened, and then have to go write and report on it, and then come back and do a reaction and report, kind of share what I'm reporting on. Okay, let's get into the chat. The Art of War. Lakers need a Twin Towers combo of AD and a legit center. So one piece of pushback that I got today that I've been thinking about is like, how much would JJ actually play AD and another center? Because if you look at it, he's not really played AD with Koloko, and I think that's probably more a reflection of what he thinks of Koloko, because there's been several games where Koloko is either a DNP CD or he plays in the first half, doesn't play in the second half, or I think there's maybe been one case where he didn't play first half, played second half. But like for the most part, it's that there's been a short leash with Koloko. Now Jackson Hayes has played a bit with AD, but it's still not been much. It's not more than like maybe a shift a game, 4 to 8 minutes a game tops. And I think there's a legitimate question of if the Lakers add depending on who it is, because that's kind of how I view it, depending on who it is and how they fit offensively and defensively, like, is that player starting? How much are they playing next to AD? Like those are kind of the two big questions, because if you're talking about purely a backup center, then, and a guy who's barely going to play with AD, I think the price that you should be willing to pay potentially changes and potentially lowers, just because it's like, what's the point of giving up a first round pick if you're going to play this guy 15 to 18 minutes a night? Like, I think if you're giving up a first for someone, ideally it needs to be like either a starting level player or a key bench guy who's going to be playing 20 plus, if not like 25 plus minutes. And I think some of these center guys that have been linked to the Lakers that I've reported on, that others have reported on, I think there's some legitimate like follow-up questions as to, is this player starting or are they coming off the bench? Like, what is their role within the offense, within the defense? How much are they playing? How much are they playing next to AD? Because you got to think like AD in the regular season, maybe you could get his minutes down to like 34 and play that other big 14 minutes a night. And then they play together maybe 6 to 8 minutes, maybe 10 tops, but that's still only playing that guy 20 to 24 minutes. And like, is that worth a first round pick? Or is it, we're willing to invest like 2 or 3 second round picks in a backup center, and whoever's the best guy we can get for that price, we will go get that guy. Maybe that is Jonas Valanciunas, right? Maybe Vucevic with the way that he's played this season. Obviously Kessler, like some of those guys might cost more than that. And it's just, maybe that's too expensive for what's a realistic role for a center on this team. Cause I have that question of like, what is the most a center can or another center can realistically play next to AD? Like, I would contend that there's no reason why Walker Kessler can't have the JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard role. Like, obviously he's not going to play, whatever they played combined, but like basically like start and play the JaVale minutes and then also get some shifts, start or come off the bench. I think it depends like what other moves you're making. What does the front court look like? But whether it's the Dwight role with some JaVale minutes in terms of like playing next to 80, or it's more starting and then playing some shifts as a backup, or in bench lineups, kind of manning the paint. Like, I think he should be good enough to play in the mid 20s with this team, if not more, again, depending on what they view their identity and how that changes things. But I think it's a legit question that I don't know the answer to, but I that's why I've often said I think a 3-and-D wing is their biggest need, because I don't think, I think Max is becoming that, but he's also 6'6". I think they need that 6'8", 6'9", a little bit bigger guy. But also I think that guy, if they get a Cam Johnson, if they get a Dorian Finney-Smith, if they get a Bruce Brown, he's obviously smaller, but someone in that, a Kuzma, whoever, someone in that size range, like that player is going to come in and play 30 plus minutes a night, most likely, especially if they're investing a first or multiple seconds. With the big man, it's a little bit trickier, because I think there is a case that the front office and maybe the Stars could want one thing, and then the coaching staff has a different vision. And of course, I think that they have those conversations before they make a potential trade. But based on the way that JJ has deployed the center rotation, it's looked more like he favors offense, he favors spacing. So maybe that's in favor of a Vucevic who could come in and space the floor. But I think there's a lot of defensive concerns with him. And like, I don't think he can man a playoff defense by himself. I think he would have to be out there with AD. So that limits your flexibility there. So I just food for thought a little bit with the center position and like what that ultimately looks like. Cause I think obviously the fan base and a lot of people go back to the 2020 model, but the team has shifted away from that, played AD way more at the 5. And I think they certainly need to peel it back a bit and get a better backup 5. It's just the degree of like, is that player worth a first if there's a potential cap to how much they're actually going to play, how much they're actually going to impact. And I don't know. I think it depends on what your other options are with trades, and if you could get a Cam Johnson or something, or some of these other guys that will probably go for a first, then maybe you save that for a different move or whatever. But I've been kind of trying to figure out like what's a realistic expectation for another center, because I think it's unclear as of right now. Ratstein, I don't think Vooch or Valanciunas would help this team if they don't get Kessler or Shaden from Brooklyn. It's not worth it. I think you mean Sharp from Brooklyn, or Day'Ron Sharp. From Brooklyn, it's not worth it to go for go for Cam and DFS instead. Solidify your bench. Yeah, and I would also say too, like I know he could be a frustrating player, but the recent level of play we've seen from Rui, from a defensive perspective and a rebounding perspective, and again, I know there's a lot of inconsistency there, so I'm not trying to overlook that, but I think Rui, again, among those like mid-sized guys, aside from the Lakers valuing him at a certain level, like I think he's really distanced himself from the pack, where maybe a few weeks ago when he wasn't playing as well, it would have been like, okay, Rui's kind of an interchangeable piece with some of these guys, or like his just not really necessarily a guy you want to keep. But I think if I'm the Lakers, I really fight to find a way to probably trade D'Lo and Gabe and keep Rui if I can, because I think Rui, even if you move him, like if you go get a Cam Johnson, you move Rui to the bench, or you go get a DFS and you want to be a bit more defensive minded with the starters, you move Rui to the bench. Like, I still think he could figure that out and almost potentially even play better based on I think we see sometimes when Rui and LeBron are staggered, Rui can have he's more at the four, more his natural position, and of course you got to create good looks for him, and that's where him and LeBron are a good tandem because LeBron can create high percentage looks for Rui. But if you pair him with D, I mean, theoretically D'Lo's being traded here, but whether it's D'Lo or Austin and someone who can create for him, that's why I think Rui, especially if you are staggering him a bit from the starters, I think he can have some big offensive performances similar to tonight. Schmidtke originals. Yeah, it has to be Cam Johnson and Rui. Crozu, Rui and Cam would be ideal. Jay Note says agreed. The poster king, I would keep Rui, get Cam Johnson. Yeah, I think they're at the point where like I think it has to be a legit, and I would say Cam Johnson's a better player and has had a better season than Rui. So like if it really came down to it, and that was like they don't want D'Lo despite him being a expiring contract, and it comes down to like February 6th, 5 minutes before the deadline. All right, we want Rui in a first. I think I would probably do that, but I would exhaust all my options to keep Rui with the way that he's been playing. And again, even if you limit, it's okay to potentially limit his role. And like if you bring in a better player or whatever, or you're reshuffling things, like move him to the bench and play him 24 minutes as like a sixth man or seventh man, whatever. So I think they should try to keep Rui is basically the point. Okay, I see I'm behind on super chat, so I will catch up now. Shabugan, if you had to bet $1,000 of your money, if your own money right now, do you think the Lakers make a trade or stand still? Oof, that's tough. I will say I think they make a trade. Now, if you ask me if they use a first, and I did like a pie chart of this recently, so I don't remember the exact percentages I used, but like I guess I would say I kind of lean more toward like a first being the most likely, then no first being second most likely, then two firsts being the third most likely. So if you flip this to like first versus two firsts, that's a pretty tough one for me. I would lean just one first, but in general, I would say I still lean toward them making a trade. My fear, if I was a fan or someone, a stakeholder who wants the Lakers, who's in a position to try and like, make them win a championship, I would just be afraid that they do a half measure or like Gabe in 2 seconds or 3 seconds for Valanciunas. Like I just don't think that moves the needle enough if that ends up being like the primary move they make. RGN Cal 4, D'Lo and an unprotected first for Miles Turner. I would do that. And I don't know exactly what Indiana would want for Miles Turner. I think on the one hand has shown he could be the starting center on a team that makes the conference finals run. And you could say it was a little fluky but I thought they had a pretty tough path to be honest. And I thought he held his own for the most part last year. It was a big part of Indiana's success, and then a big part of their playoff run. I've been a big Miles Turner guy as the Lake. I mean, he's been attached to the Lakers for years. They said it many times. They got to the 1 yard line right before the 2022-23 season for Miles Turner, but he healed and ultimately backed out. So I would do that. I don't know if Indiana would do that, especially because their team, I've talked about it. Like if you look at their history, they just don't like to tank. They're a team that like their worst teams are always like high 20s outside of maybe like an outlier season with like injuries, or there's obviously the Malice at the Palace aftermath and all that stuff. But like outside of that, they've always been high 20s or like low 30s. Like they're one of these teams that never does like a full tank rebuild. They're always kind of in the mix, at least like semi-competitive. So I don't know that they would just trade one of their best players, even if it is solid value. Also, like D'Lo just doesn't really fit unless they're making him, you know, a bench guy who's like just not that involved. Because between Halliburton and McConnell, like I feel like they have a pretty solidified point guard rotation. Maybe they play him off the ball and more as a shooter, but Lakers have kind of tried to do that and it hasn't exactly gone to either party's liking. So I don't know if I would do that. If I'm the Lakers, I don't know that the Pacers would do that. Chris Hernandez, what do you think about Mark Williams? I would give up a first for him. He's young and Hornets ain't doing nothing anytime soon. I like Mark Williams. I'm going to pull up his numbers right now just to make sure person isn't because Miles Turner is actually another one where he's like low key not played as well this season. I'm not as concerned as some might be, but that could also lower his asking price potentially. So Mark Williams, looking at it, he's only played in 8 games this year, 16 minutes a game. So his minutes have dropped. I forgot if he's dealing with an injury or something. 11.6 rebounds a game, just under a block. Let me pull up his game log quickly. Okay, yeah, he just returned from. He's been playing better. Like, yeah, I mean, he's 23. I like Mark Williams. I also like Nick Richards. And if you could get Nick Richards for not a first round pick, I would also be interested in him, depending on the price. But I do like Mark Williams. Miles, Larry Nance would be my top big target if I'm LA. I would really like Larry Nance. It's been odd that he has not really played in Atlanta. I don't really get it. There's also something to. There's always a little bit of a red flag for me when a guy gets traded as much as he's been traded. When like on paper from the outside looking in, I feel like he's always played well. And I don't know if it's just like bad luck or bad circumstances and he's constantly kind of thrown in these deals, but he's been on several teams now and it feels like everyone like talks highly of him and his fit and how well he plays and the versatility and stuff, but then he still gets thrown in these deals as kind of like matching salaries. So because obviously that pick with, that trade with New Orleans and Atlanta, him going to Atlanta, he was more of the throw in. It was obviously the picks for Murray and Dyson Daniels, who's ended up being one of the steals of the summer. So I'm not quite sure what's up with Larry Nance. He's also a bit small, but in terms of switchability, I think he could play next to AD. I like him as a passer, as a playmaker, just as like a decision maker. I think he's a smart player. I do like him, especially if, like if you could get him for a second. I think it'd be a pretty low cost. Super chat from Keon Park. Fox, Young, and Levine, money aside, who's the best fit with the Lakers, especially after LBJ retirement? I would say it's definitely not Levine, in my opinion. I don't think Levine is in the same class as Trae Young and De'Aaron Fox. Trae Young and De'Aaron Fox have both led 50+ win teams. Or Young's at least made the conference finals. I don't know if the Hawks. I'm gonna take that back. Okay, so Fox has led a 50-win team, and they lost in the first round. But I think that takes a certain level of player. Young has gone to the conference finals and had some big playoff moments, and I think he's at a certain level. Levine, I would put in a different class entirely than those three. So I put him as a distant third. Between those two, I lean Fox, to be honest. I think he's a bit bigger. He's better defensively. As a of course, Trae Young hits the big shots, but Fox has hit a bunch of big shots and also been one of the most clutch players statistically over the last few years, and always among the fourth quarter, scoring leaders. So I would lean Fox probably just because of the size on the defense. I think with Trae, though it's great to protect him with AD, I think Trae just there's a limitation to like how good he'll be defensively. He's also not really shown an interest in trying defensively. Like there's kind of shades of Dame there for me, and guys like Dame and Trae just being glaring red targets for opponents to target. I think that just kind of limits your defensive upside with a group. So I would lean Fox, honestly, among these three. Like Trae's probably better than Fox. I think it's probably close there, but like in terms of fit and like who, sometimes I think there's a difference between like who's better and who's better for winning. And I think they're close enough that I would lean Fox, but I don't think you could necessarily go wrong with either choice. I just think, I think the one wrong choice here is Levine. I think these two guys are in a different stratosphere. Android Andres, D'Lo for Mo Wagner. He is out for the season now. He got a knee injury. He's out for the season. And I know some people have mentioned Wendell Carter. He cannot be traded because of when he signed his extension. So looks like Orlando is probably out of the picture. Just as a heads up, I'm going to go about 10 more minutes because I am not feeling great. You guys can't tell from my voice. So I'll probably wrap in about 10, but you know me, it could be a Jovan 10. We'll see. Super chat from RGN Cal 4, John Collins, no first needed, can start with AD. I'm not the biggest John Collins guy, particularly for his defense. If you could talk me into it, depending on the price, but if I'm looking at like some of the guys that have been linked in terms of, especially if you're saying like move Rui to the bench, I don't know that I like John Collins enough to do that. I think it would have to be someone more along the lines of like a Cam Johnson type, and someone like, I mean, because you also, when you're watching these teams play the Lakers, you're kind of envisioning like the fit and what that looks like. And to me, he's kind of a tweener defensively, where he's more of a center offensively, but he's not really a center defensively. And I would like either a slightly better offensive player or a significantly better defensive player in that spot. And again, guys like Cam Johnson's much better as a shooter and just an offensive weapon, in my opinion. DFS is a much better defender. So again, if those, depending on the prices, and if those guys, I mean, DFS, I haven't even mentioned it yet. Like there's a report from, I believe it was Mark Stein. I don't know who had it first between Mark Stein and Nets Daily, but they both reported on potential DFS to Memphis trade, and it maybe going for a lottery protected first, which is that kind of course corrects the market a bit, because I've talked about Dennis going for 3 seconds has maybe lowered the price for some of these role players. If DFS goes for a protected first, that then kind of raises the price on some of these guys. But if the prices get out of control and John Collins is like the final realistic or like the best guy that the Lakers could get, and it's like D'Lo and matching salary and a second or something for John Collins, sure, I'd be interested in that, but I would not have him, in my opinion, as one of the primary guys they target. Ken Carter, thank you for the super chat. Realistic 3-and-D guy, LA can cop. Does 2 picks get you Herb? I think 2 picks would probably be borderline with Herb, which is kind of wild. Like they've made him very untouchable, it seems like. I think you put 3 picks on the table, they'd have to consider it, though. As I've broken down before, Lakers have 3 picks, but they do not have access to 3 picks. They can at most trade 2 of them and then do swaps with the rest of their picks. So I I think it gets you in at least a conversation with New Orleans, but I would love Herb with the Lakers. Like he would check a lot of boxes for what they need on the perimeter. It is kind of wild thinking like offering 2 picks for De'Aaron Fox and then also 2 picks for Herb Jones, but the price of 3-and-D guys is at a premium. I would say depending on your definition of 3-and-D, like Dorian Finney-Smith has been about a 40% 3-point shooter this year and solid defender. Bruce Brown historically kind of checks the box, though his shooting is a bit up and down. Cam Johnson, I don't think is quite, doesn't have quite the defense to be considered a 3-and-D guy, but he is big. He has some athleticism, length. So I think he kind of rates out as like an average defender, and maybe you can coax more out of him with motivation and the chip of like contending for something. But those are kind of the guys. I like what is it, Tumani Kamara from Portland. I don't know, because of his contract situation, I could see them wanting to hold on to him, but like he's a guy who I really like as a defender. Bit inconsistent and raw offensively, but as a defender, I think he's a potential, like, really, really solid rotation defender. Otherwise, I mean, Kuzma, but he's kind of overqualified to be a 3-and-D guy, but then he's also, I think, slipped defensively since being in Washington. Jeremy Grant, I think that ship has sailed, and he's not had a good year. And look, I was a big Jeremy Grant proponent, and I've done a 180 on that. I don't like the fit as much anymore. Jerry Soriano, your lender for life. What kind of trade value do you think Connect has? I think he has. Well, I would say, I mean, he's got at least first round pick value. Now, I think at the peak of his heater, you probably could have gotten like 2, like he would probably have the equivalent to like 2 firsts. Now, I don't know what quality, like there's degrees of firsts, right? In terms of, obviously, depending on the year and like the draft class and where the team is projected to be. So is it a potential lottery pick? Is it a potential mid first round pick? Is it a potential late first round pick? Boston's own first round picks are not going to be as valuable as Charlotte's own first round picks, right? Because Charlotte is likely going to be in the lottery, top 5, top 8, whatever. Boston is almost certainly going to be bottom 5, if not bottom 3 team in terms of where they're picking. So there's always degrees of this stuff, but I think at the peak, he probably could have gotten you in the conversation for a couple firsts. I would say now he's more at like the just solid first round range. But like we talk about a guy like Walker Kessler in Utah asking for 2 first round picks. I don't see why the Lakers wouldn't turn around and ask for 2 firsts for Dalton as well. So I think he's outperformed his draft slot. I know he's had this shooting slump. I think he's going to be fine. Maybe we do lower the ceiling a little bit in some of the comparisons of like a Klay Thompson and some of the things that were being thrown around at the time were a bit much. But I think he's got, I mean, certainly compared to, if we're ranking like the players in terms of their value, I think of course it's 80 and LeBron, and then I'll probably put Austin third, and then I think Dalton's probably 4th. Although Max is making that more of a conversation, but I think Dalton would still be ahead of him. JK Lobos, thank you for the super chat. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you. Jalen Duren has been in some trade rumors between Pacers and Pistons. Would you like him as a backup center for LA? I'd love Jalen Duren. I don't know what the price would be off the top of my head. I have not heard his name mentioned or had any conversations about him. I would assume it would be at least the first. He is, that dude's a beast. That dude's a monster. So yeah, I mean, I would even consider him potentially like a spot starter. Again, depending on the direction that LA wants to go and what the rest of the group looks like. But yeah, Jalen Duren, I would like. I would assume the price would be high though, and maybe higher than the Lakers would want to pay. J. Dot trade for Nance, Cam Johnson, Keon, Tyrese Ellis. I like Keon Ellis, and I thought tonight was more of a bounce back performance for him, against the Lakers, right? Because I don't think he played that well in the 2 games in Sacramento. Cam Johnson, been on the record fan of that, and Nance just talked about him. So yeah, depending on what the picks look like, depending on what the outgoing salary looks like, I'd be open to that. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Do you think top form Lakers, including LBJ, would have a chance beating top form Cavs the last game of the year? I feel like this game's outcome makes Rob decide to make trades. Well, so I continue to say that I've heard Lakers have been patient with the trade approach, relatively, and it's been more of them waiting toward that February 6th date, and that if the right deal comes up sooner, they will make it. But it's seemingly been more them kind of waiting this out until like mid to late January on the early side. And I noted that Valanciunas and maybe the Nets wings, because Brooklyn's trying to tear it all down ASAP. Those are some exceptions, but Valanciunas, it's been 2 weeks now officially since he's been available. They've not come to an agreement, and it seems like there could be a bidding war potentially with for him later on. And then the Nets, I mean, again, with Dorian Finney-Smith potentially going for a protected first, like maybe those prices are a little bit higher than anticipated. Now, top form Lakers with LeBron, I mean, we have some, we don't know now what's going to happen with Gabe. I do think that's potentially in this matchup, specifically with Mitchell and Garland. I think they could use Gabe. Of course, they can use Max, use Cam, but I think Gabe could be used at least in like some of the bench units. But if you get top form LeBron and you get arrested LeBron with 5 games off, or 5 days off, excuse me, I think they have a chance. And Lakers are a much better team at home. Like just looking at their home record versus the road record, they are 10-4 at home and 8-9 on the road. So they're right there with the best teams in the league at home outside of Cleveland 17-1. They're 10-3 on the road. Cleveland's really good. I will say Cleveland 27-4. They are steamrolling everybody. They have a plus 11.7 point differential. Just pulling up their recent results. They just beat the Nuggets in. I didn't see. Okay, they're actually going to be on a back-to-back. They're playing in San Francisco on Monday. I did not know this. So it will be second night of a back-to-back. So that certainly swings it, I think, partly in the Lakers' favor. But Cleveland's won 6 in a row entering that Golden State game Monday. There's a loss in there to the Heat, but they had won 4 in a row before that. So they've won 10 of 11 going into this Golden State game. And Golden State has not been playing their best basketball. So it's going to be a tough game, even with them on the second night of a back-to-back. But I do think the Lakers have a legit shot, and it would be a statement win to end 2024 to put some pressure on the front office to make a move, to make big moves sooner than later. But certainly at some point is better than not, right? So what would be a big win to close out the year. I will go 5 minutes and Raymond V, you're past your time limit. Get some rest. You're sick. I'll go 5 minutes and then we'll get out of here because, like I said, this is going to be my last stream, barring something crazy happening of the year, and I just want to spend 5 more minutes with you guys. I'll miss you guys. Drew Nakayama, DK burst in the 4th, kept the Kings at bay tonight. Yeah, I mean, you see it with Dalton and with D'Lo. I think those are the 2 guys that can get absolutely hot like that. Like Dalton's more of a pure shooter, but we've seen the flurries from D'Lo more so last year than this year. But whatever. When the Lakers have a guy kind of making shots like that, like it's such a different look because they are such a paint heavy rim attack, post ups, cutting, trying to attack from the weak side, get to the rim. And when they just have a guy keeping the defense honest, the way that Dalton did tonight, and the way that he has in the past, the way that D'Lo has in the past, like that's just such a game changer offensively for this group. Miles says Duren is a bottom 5 defensive center in the league. I don't know that I would agree with that, but certainly there were some rough moments for him against the Lakers. I will say that. He might be a guy that maybe looks more the part than like is the part. RG and Cal 4. Cam Johnson is not 3 and D. His D isn't that good. Are Rui over Jeremy Grant. Yeah. I'm actually on. I agree with the last point. I think Cam Johnson's okay defensively, but he's certainly not like a stopper. Justine Severo, Philippines is Jovan Nation. Shout out to the Philippines. My mom actually lived there growing up due to her father being in the armed forces. So she speaks very highly of the Philippines. So shout out to the Philippines and those watching wherever you are all over the world. I know at odd hours because of Pacific time. So thank you. Chris Hernandez, 1 through 10. How confident are you that the Lakers make a trade? I'd say a 7, but I don't, maybe 6.5. I don't feel great. I lean more that way. I'll say 6.5. J Note W Jovan. Thank you. Schmidt K Originals, Buha, what's your best Cam Johnson deal? 1 pick, 2 picks. What's realistic? I would not give up 2 picks. I think 2 picks is an overpay. I would give up 1 pick. And at most, either it depends who's in the deal, I guess, too. That's a big factor for me because Cam, I've talked about this, is a little complicated. His salary outgoing from the Nets is going to be $23 million, but the incoming salary to the Lakers would be $27. So Lakers then have to send out $27, but then the Nets are now, there's that $4 million gap that the Nets are taking in, but because the outgoing is 23, the incoming is 27, and they're right there under the luxury tax under the first apron. So it's easiest if there's a third team involved and figuring out a way to reroute maybe that, if the Lakers, let's say it's like, you could do Rui, but I would try not to if I'm the Lakers. You could do D'Lo and like 2 minimum guys, but it's not quite there. It gets a little tricky to match the 27, and you do probably have to do some type of third team trade, or Brooklyn do a trade before that creates some flexibility more on their end in terms of the financial side, which maybe that's the DFS trade. I don't know the exact financial numbers off the top of my head with Memphis and Brooklyn, but I would say depending on the outgoing salary, if we're going to put that aside, like which Lakers are in it, if we're just talking pure picks and value, I would consider 1 pick. If we're going unprotected, I would probably put it at like a 2nd. If it's a lottery protected, I would consider adding a swap or 2 seconds. And so that would kind of be my range. I don't think I would do an unprotected and 2 seconds or a swap. I think that might be too much, but maybe I'm overthinking that. I don't know. I'd have to. It really would depend on if it comes down to like keeping Rui versus not. Like maybe I'd be willing to do a little bit more to keep Rui, but that's kind of where I'm at. But I don't think it's going to cost. I'd be surprised if he goes for 2 picks. Like I know that's what they want. I would be surprised. As in 2 first-round picks. Obviously, it could be a first and a second, whatever. Sean Parker, Jovan, did you see the Nurkic situation? I did. That was pretty crazy. That's like the closest we've gotten to a fight in a while, I would say, unless I'm forgetting a situation. Gabriella G, do we even need LeBron? Haha, JK, hope you have a happy New Year's, man. Thank you, Gabriella. Happy New Year's to you as well. And yes, the Lakers still need LeBron. Glenn S, just wanted to say have a happy New Year and feel better, bro. Thank you. I appreciate you. Happy New Year. I see we got a super chat. A couple. One from Ken Carter. Thoughts on the Jimmy era in Miami? Did Pat fail him? I don't think. I think it's largely been a successful era, to be honest. Like I know that they haven't had a championship, but they made the finals twice. I think they made the conference finals 3 or 4 times. Jimmy to me is kind of he's a weird star because it's like in the regular season he's been like, and I think he's obviously declined the last like year or so, but kind of peak Jimmy from like, let's say, or peak Jimmy in Miami from like 2019 to 2023, we'll say, which includes both finals runs. In the regular season, he was often like a top 15 to 25 guy, I would say. And then come playoff time, he'd be top 10 and like knocking on that top 5 door. So he was just a weird player where like he really would, like playoff Jimmy really was a thing that he would just go to a different level in the playoffs. I mean, I don't blame Pat for like not getting Dame Lillard and that was kind of the big swing. Like I think Miami's always been aggressive in trying to get stars, and anytime a star is available, they typically get linked to Miami, and there's an interest there. It sounded like there was some bad blood between Portland and Miami, and that they didn't like the way that was handled, and that's ultimately why he went to Milwaukee. But I think Miami's drafted well. They've scouted well. They've often had pretty deep teams. Spo's one of the best coaches in the league, if not the best coach in the league. And I think they've had some injury stuff, and they've also had, they ran into the Lakers in the finals, and you had 2 top 5 guys on the Lakers, right? Like, and you just, that's tough to beat. Then they ran into the Nuggets, and they had the best player in the world and another guy, Jamal Murray, who at least at the time had risen up from like maybe a top 40, 45 guy to like a top 20, top 15 guy in that postseason. So it's like that was a juggernaut, a tough Denver team. So I don't, then they've had Boston in their way, and Boston's been, and Milwaukee in their way. Like the East at the top has been pretty tough the last few years. So I think they've honestly probably overachieved. I've never felt like the 2 years they made the finals, I don't feel like they were really the best team in the East. They just were able to dig deep, and some of it was like Milwaukee and Boston crumbling and whatever. But I think they've probably exceeded expectations, honestly, in my opinion. Keon Park, if for whatever reason D'Lo trade not happening, do you see the Lakers giving D'Lo a new contract or let him be an unrestricted free agent in the summer? I would lean toward the latter. I think that there's an element of like you want to keep an asset depending on what the contract looks like, but I would almost assume D'Lo wouldn't want to be back. Like it wouldn't make sense on his end, and unless the Lakers are offering the most money, which certainly would be offering him a pay cut. And so I think for I think for both parties, it's probably best to move on relatively soon here, but can't rule it out because they've had opportunities to move him or have been trying to move him and haven't been able to. And So I guess it can't be ruled out, but I think it would be unlikely. Sean Parker, Jovan, is it true we have 3 picks to use? So I've talked about this on the storylines episode of Buha's block, the last episode. So I would point you to this. I will give you like a 30-second summation of it. Lakers technically have access to use 3 first-round picks in terms of 2029, 2030, 2031. And 2027, the top 4 protection, or that right now is protected with Utah. They could technically trade that. However, because of the Stepien rule, which prevents you from trading first-round picks in consecutive years, they cannot trade all 3 of those first-round picks. So if a team wants the 2030 pick for whatever reason, they could trade that one, but they would not be able to trade 2029 or 2031. So as of right now, they technically have access to the 3 of like they could put any of those 3 in a deal, but to use the most picks possible, it would be 2029 and 2031, which quick math is 2 first-round picks, not 3 first-round picks. Now, the couple caveats are they have 3 pick swaps, so they can pick swap 2026, 2028, and if we're saying they're putting both picks in a trade or on the table, then 2030 pick swap. Technically, they could do a 2029 or 2031 instead of trading those 2, but I don't want to overcomplicate it. So we'll say like their maximum assets are 2 first-round picks, 2029, 2031, 3 pick swaps, 2026, 2028, and 2030, and then they have 5 second-round picks, including the Clippers' second-round pick this year. So that's all their assets, but really it comes back to 2 first-round picks that they can trade at a maximum, and 3 pick swaps. So they have like 5 first-round pick assets to move, but really in terms of like the value of a first-round pick that they can trade, it's only 2. So that was not quite sure. I'm not going to speculate on where that's coming from or why that came out the way it did, but that's incorrect. Big Baby Sports, is there a chance Lakers don't make a trade? There's shout out to Big Baby. There is always a chance, but I would be pretty surprised. Robel, Jovan 5 equals 15 minutes. Yeah, I've gone. It's been almost. I think been almost 20. O to the we. I'm nervous that RP won't make any moves because of how good we've been playing. Thoughts? Also, this is my favorite channel. Awesome content. Thank you. That means a lot. When anyone says it's favorite channel or one of the favorites, it always means a lot to hear that. So thank you. I hear you, and I have thought about that too. I think it's certainly possible. I would argue that it's hard to. I think if that ends up being the case, that there are going to be some difficult questions when they have the post. There's always a post trade deadline press conference. So, like, I would just sort of pose the question of like, okay, well, over entering the season, you said you wanted to judge the roster, based on the first 30 games, and that was going to, that implicitly implies. That implies that you are looking to upgrade the roster if it shows enough, basically. And if you are content, like there's almost no way, if anything, I just think it's harder for them to justify not making a move because they think the team is so good when like clearly there are flaws with this group. And again, I've mentioned like point differential, net rating. There are some markers with this group that are not positive that I think need to be addressed. So I would just say I would have no issue calling that out in a press conference. Like it just, the logic would not make sense. Android Andreas. So you're saying there's a chance? I think so. But I also thought that last year, although I think they're in a better position to make trades now for sure. Kane Carter, if you give up both firsts, would New Orleans give up Herb Jones? What do you think they'd ask for? I think they'd ask for at least 2 firsts. So I think you get in the conversation, but I would like to get in that conversation from the Lakers. Glenn S., do you think JJ Redick has any say on trades or whatnot? I think we're going to find out, honestly, based on how the trade season goes and then how JJ uses those players. Because I talked about the backup center position, for example, earlier, and it's like if they go trade for a Vucevic, a Valanciunas, or whatever, and that player has a minimal role with the Lakers or pretty quickly falls out of favor with the coaching staff, that I think we kind of have an idea. Like JJ probably wasn't on board with this, but he kind of had to play along because the front office wanted it, ownership wanted it, stars wanted it, some combination of those three wanted it, whatever the case may be. So I think based on what they do and then how JJ reacts to that, I think we'll have some clarity as to like how he actually felt. But I mean, he has said that he and Rob are partners, and I think it's tough to make a trade and not consult your coach and at least give them a heads up or some input. They've talked about JJ as a long-term prospect as a coach and someone they want to build with and develop with. So I do think he's going to have some say. I don't think he's going to have the most say. I don't think he's necessarily going to be a deciding factor, but I think he will be one of the voices in the room making part of the decision. RV14, aside from Herb, is Trey Murphy available? He'd be a good get too, in my opinion. Yes, those two are apparently the guys that they have the highest asking prices for. So I would not be surprised if that's also 2 first-round picks. But either one of those guys, I'd be open to. Louis Marrero. What about DeJounte Murray? I think they're going to ask for a lot for him as well because they just traded 2 picks for him and Dyson Daniels. So I don't see them accepting much less than that. And I don't think the Lakers want to go back to 2 picks for him. Romel, do you see a trade similar to Rui for 3 seconds and none this year? I could see something like that where the Lakers make a trade out of the blue for a, let's say, like distressed young asset, but I don't know who that would be. And that's part of the way the Lakers operate. Raymond V, good night, y'all. And I also saw, Raymond, you said people were chanting my name in the Philippines. I think you're saying that in jest or kind of kidding around. So I saw that and I didn't get to respond. L.A. Jovan, do you think D'Lo, DK, and 2 first-round picks for Herb and Messi works? I think that's interesting. I think they'd have to consider that. I don't know if it would work, to be honest, but I think you have a legit conversation with that. Like, I think they're open to at least talking about it. RV14, most realistic but high-end trade they could get. I'd say De'Aaron Fox, I guess, depending on what the ultimate price is and how much the clutch factor enters the mix. Otherwise, I guess like Zach LaVine or Cam Johnson, depending on how you view both of those guys. I see Ken Carter, you're asking about Bam. What do you think about Bam? Do you think he'd look better as a third option, similar to AG Draymond? Do you think he's more of a 4 than a 5? I think he could be either. I probably think, honestly, he's more of a 5, but I think you do want to give him a certain level of size and athleticism next to him in the front court. I think he's better offensively than both Aaron Gordon and Draymond as a scorer. And him versus Draymond, definitely a better playmaker than AG. Him versus Draymond's close, but he might even be a better playmaker than Draymond, like currently. So I think Bam's a good second option. I think third option, of course, you always want to slot guys in like a better spot. So that like, if you could have him be your third option, that's great. But I think he's fine as a second. You need a true, top 10 guy as your first option. And I don't think Miami has that. Okay. Ramel, thanks again. Jovan, rest up and have a happy new year. Go Lakers. Thank you. Happy new year to you as well. I will do my best. Dark Galaxy says not trading AR, DK, and all the picks for Fox. I'm with you. I said that if for those who haven't seen, please check out my last episode of Buha's Block on it'll be under the video portion of my channel, or for those listening on just the podcast feed. But I said I think if you're giving up both picks and like potentially a pick swap or two and like seconds or whatever the draft capital ends up being, I fight to keep at least 2 of AR, DK, and Max. And really, I think AR is the one that I'd love to put AR and De'Aaron Fox together in the backcourt and maybe include one of Dalton or Max. But I'd really try to keep like those 3, and everyone else is available. All the other picks are available, and see what that looks like. Okay. I'm going to wrap here. I went an hour and a half, and feels like a good place to wrap. But I appreciate you, K Norris. I will answer your question. Would you prefer the Lakers getting an established veteran big or young big with untapped potential? I lean the latter. I like the 2 bigs I would like the most out of everyone linked to them are Walker Kessler and Robert Williams, and they both come with some untapped potential, and with Robert Williams some injury stuff. But I'm going to lean that way more so than established veteran personally. But that will do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, like this video right now if you've not done so yet, and drop a comment. And I'll say, you know what, for those, like, I would love to know in the comments how long you've been following the show or the channel, what you like, what's your moment of 2024 from the show, if particular episode, something dumb I said, whatever it is, like a favorite memory, favorite moment, would love to know in the comments. And also, if you want to look forward, let me know what you'd like to see in 2025 in terms of guests, in terms of the show. If you have any feedback, I would love to hear that as well. So drop a comment and let me know, again, kind of either looking back at 2024 or looking ahead to 2025. And then for those listening right now, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Wednesday, January 1st, barring the Lakers making a trade or something crazy happening, like LeBron going for 60 on his birthday or something, or right after his birthday. Besides that, I will be back on Wednesday in 2025. I will talk to you then. Thank you all again for all of your support. Thank you for watching, listening, liking, commenting, super chatting, sharing. And I wish you all a happy, healthy, and safe new year. Hope you get to spend some time with your loved ones, your friends, your family. And I look forward to talking to you all next year and beyond. Talk to you soon.